Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rationable Interviews, which I'm thinking of changing the name around to Rationable Conversations because that's how I want it to be. Actually, it should be more of a conversation where we're talking, kind of discussing different ideas. And today we've got someone who I've been wanting to interview for a while now, and especially now, I think is the perfect time. Kyle Polich is with me here on Rationable Interviews, and we're going to be discussing some amazing things, especially AI. You know how crazy AI is going right now. So, who better than to talk to the data skeptic himself? And Kyle, welcome to the show.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for the invite.
Oh, my pleasure. We met back in SciCon last October,
Hmm.
and I was so excited to meet you because I hadn't heard of somebody who is doing skepticism in the field of IT and data. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of information there that a lot of people can't really parse out or understand, but there's still a lot of stuff that kind of gets thrown about, and a lot of fear and
yeah,
anticipation and excitement that us laypersons don't understand a lot of.
sure.
We try to get our heads around it. For example, there's a friend of mine who is a software developer who I did share your podcast with. He thoroughly enjoys it. And he's in the US right now studying about privacy and the laws surrounding that and trying to work out how that works with data and with information technology as a whole.
Yeah.
Um,
Exciting field to be in right now.
Oh, absolutely. And he was trying to explain to me what cryptocurrency was. I
Sure.
had never heard of that before he mentioned it. And I spoke to him for half an hour and he tried various different ways of explaining it to me. And I was like, I don't get it. It's too weird.
It's
But
five or six complicated ideas all implemented together. That's, I think, part of the challenge.
yeah, then I got paid to write scripts about this topic. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm getting paid for this. I better get this right the first time around.
Sure.
So that definitely helped, actually. That helped me get my head around it. But today we're going to be talking about something far more complex than that. So, of course, we know about the latest developments in AI, and everybody's talking about it. Everybody's going absolutely berserk, talking about Chat GPT
Yeah,
and DAL-E and Midjourney as far as the graphic AIs are concerned. But
right.
I had a few very important questions. So, first of all, can you just break down, like, we always imagine AI to be like HAL 9000 from 2001, or all science fiction is just filled with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What stage are we at right now when we're thinking about that? Or for the newer audiences, Interstellar, you have those robots who are talking about all sorts of other things. We'll get into the sci-fi later, but what are we talking about when you're talking about current AI? What is it exactly?
Well, I think the best way to summarize it is to say we are at a point of inflection.
Hmm.
As the data skeptic, I have spent so far the first leg of my tenure in that role telling people sometimes to worry about certain things, but mostly that A, we don't have AGI today, which still remains true, and that we're not going to have it in the near future, which is now an unclear statement if that
The G
remains
part.
true.
What's the G in there part?
Ah, AGI is artificial general intelligence.
Ah,
And I use that distinction because AI is a term that's bankrupt at this point. We say, oh, the video game has AI, your phone has AI. And it, like, okay, it does. It has some amazing features that were learned through an algorithm that is machine learning, that is a form of intelligence, but it's not an intelligence that has rights or feelings or anything like that. And that's historically been what deployments of ML have been. We currently have not yet invented artificial general intelligence, although maybe we should say we're recording this on April 14th because I am more convinced than I used to be that it's going to happen in my lifetime.
ah. And what's the significance of April 14th?
That's today's date.
Oh, okay, I thought there was something deeper going on. But so ML is machine learning. And of course, at every Apple presentation, we get told about machine learning. So machines are learning in a certain way, right? So
Absolutely.
How are they kind of absorbing that information, whatever information that they are designed to do?
Well, there's a lot of techniques, and it depends on how deep we want to go. But if we rewind to like the technology that we were using in, let's say, the 80s and the 90s, it was pretty simple mathematical tools. So remember when spam in email was a big issue, and they pretty much solved email spam. I don't know about solved, but made a lot of progress with a very simple technique called a Bayesian, a naive Bayes classifier, which basically looks at the frequency of certain words. So something that says join now, that would be a phrase you would expect in a lot of spam emails. But if there are other indicators that make you think I intended to sign up for that, or it's part of like the CFI newsletter that I want to get and it says join this special thing, that's not spam. So you can't just have a blacklist of terms. That's not going to work more than maybe 80-90% of the time. So
Hmm.
by looking at simple statistical frequency, they solve that problem. That doesn't solve world hunger, it solves spam.
Yeah.
Now let's talk
And
about another algorithm. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Gmail, no, Gmail did a really fantastic job of this. Like, I
Oh,
used to have
yeah,
a Hotmail account and I immediately switched over to Gmail when I just saw that, oh my God, like all my spam is in a different folder. I don't have to start marking things all the way down. Like, Hotmail was horrible at it for quite a while.
sure.
Gmail really came in, and at least in my experience, changed the game as far as that's concerned. So, was Google one of the first people to implement this in spam filtering, or
They were certainly one of the most successful. I don't know if they can say they were the pioneer.
definitely more successful than I can vouch for?
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying.
Well, so we can look at kind of the history of algorithms and see how they've grown more and more advanced. That was a fairly simple one. If you want to look into the history of it, I'll spare you the math today, but I guarantee you, you could, and all listeners could understand the math of a naive Bayes classifier. Understanding the math used in some of the contemporary techniques, like the transformer, that will require a little bit more background knowledge and training.
Yeah,
So our approaches, our algorithms have grown in sophistication. But more than that, our computers have gotten incredibly fast, incredibly parallel, and have access to enormous amounts of data. And those are the three secret ingredients.
I see. So, and of course, right now there have been so many different forms of AI that have been used, and especially algorithms. We've got
Yeah,
Google Assistant, which is the most successful because they have the most amount of data, I think, arguably,
sure.
to basically answer certain questions. Siri, probably the one of the least, maybe if you want to count Bixby, which is, I'm just talking about ones that we have like on our phones and everything for your lives. But then Elon Musk has been very nervous about letting AI get developed. And while at the same time, he's using it in his own cars, and they have
Sure.
what do you call it? I couldn't call it a herd mentality. That would be slightly, but there is something of a hive mind happening with Tesla cars, right?
I believe so. I'm not an expert in that. I don't follow automated driving too closely, but I catch a lot of the big headlines. And yeah, it's a shared system that they all have the same model deployed into each car. I think they are also looking at how those cars can communicate with each other on the road, but I'm not sure of the extent of that research.
Yeah, and of course, there have been a lot of mistakes. People have, I think, given it a little too much freedom at points and ended up.
Well, a couple people died, so absolutely yes, a few people trusted it too much.
Yeah, I remember there was. Have you heard of the Darwin Awards?
I have, yeah, absolutely.
There was this.
I don't know if the guy who was watching the movie got one or not, but very sad he didn't understand his need to maintain a safe position in the car.
Yeah, and this same thing happened with apparent. I don't know if this is the true story, but I heard this on the Darwin Awards back in the days of early email when some guy had put on cruise control, which now everybody knows what cruise control is. But back then, he put on cruise control in his RV while he was on a highway and he went in the back to make some eggs.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And he, well, obviously flew off the road. But then after that, he sued the company, the RV company, and he won. They had to
Really?
put that, put a line with in the user manual saying that please keep your hands on the wheel while you've put on cruise control because this is not going to just drive your car automatically. And
Let's hope people read that page.
I know. Well, now, of course, now most of us at least know what cruise control is. But coming
Right.
back to AI, sorry for digressing there.
No,
But
it's a great example, actually, I think, because you and I at least, maybe not the RV driver, but we have an understanding that is a very simple mechanical thing that doesn't have the full purview or all of the intelligence and actuators to truly drive in all situations.
Yeah.
But I think within our lifetimes, we are going to have the potential to have vehicles that have those capabilities. So there will come a point where we will have to accept and trust those.
Yes, indeed. And it's coming. It's already being worked on so heavily by so many tech companies. But
Yes.
when it comes to GPT, like the GPT-4, which has already gone above and beyond, like it seems like every half version, like GPT 3.5 is what really made the news. Then GPT-4 came out and they've not just a level up. They've gone, well, at least from our perspective, many levels up when it comes to the sophistication of the output, the language models, the how
Yes.
much sense it makes. And what exactly is GPT-4? How is it being able to give us these uncannily accurate answers to what we are looking for?
Well, the short answer is next word prediction. It's an incredibly smart system that is all it's trying to do is say what word should come next in this conversation and then do that repetitively, right? So guess the next word and the word after that and just keep predicting what comes next and spitting that out. That's really all it's doing. In some sense, it's a mathematical parlor trick. The thing about it is it's done at such scales that we get emergent results. So, to take an analogy, again, going back to Google and how they did really well with Gmail, before that, they did really well with search. And
Yeah.
in part, that's because of an algorithm called PageRank. Now, prior to PageRank, a lot of search engines had techniques for indexing the web. If a site said the word skeptic on it a bunch of times, the more times it said it, the more important that word was. So we would keyword stuff our pages to get to the top of the list
Yeah.
and silly hacks like that. So
Oh,
PageRank came along and said, we're going to take a different approach. We're going to base our ranks on links. So if I link, as you said, you're going to link to in the show notes to Data Skeptic, that conveys authority. And it's really good for me because you're an authoritative source for topics like this. And when you link to me, that's conveying some of your authority to me. You link to me, you don't link to like psychics and people like that. So PageRank was a smart idea that when it was implemented at large scales, suddenly gave us the search engine that worked really well, surprisingly well.
mm.
And that was just because of a clever algorithm scaled up. And we're seeing the same kind of thing here that next word prediction, as trivial as that sounds, when you have the right architecture, specifically something called the transformer architecture, and you pump an incredible amount of data through it, it does incredible things.
Like the whole internet, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Up till 2020 or 2021.
I believe that's been fixed now, actually, because I was asking it for book recommendations a few days ago, and it recommended a recent book. So I think
Oh,
they've already addressed that issue.
yikes. And well, and of course, high school kids are super excited about
Oh, yeah,
chat.
as they should be. I
I
have a very punk rock attitude in this. I think high school kids use this tool as much as you can. Don't break any rules if there's cheating rules, but this is a technology. Don't let the old people tell you shouldn't use it. Same as you should use calculators.
absolutely. But the thing is, how do we know if the answer is right or not? There's a lot of misinformation out there as well.
Very much so, yeah. In fact, I'm actually surprised how little misinformation I can get out of GPT-4. You can get it, but you
Yeah.
have to work at it a little bit. I don't know if that's because they put certain safety guards in place or if that was an emergent property as well. But yeah, in the same way, human beings are sources of good and bad information.
Yeah,
Algorithms will be sources of good and bad information in the future.
exactly. Because a friend of mine actually put in a question like, have aliens visited us? And ChatGPT gave an answer which I probably would have given him, which was quite factual. Like there's a lot of stories and a lot of theories have been put forward, but there is no hard evidence that it has happened. And I was like, wait, how did he get this answer? And he said, oh, I asked ChatGPT. I was like, that's impressive. I
It
should try.
truly is. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the stuff that really freaks me out because when I was writing about this about ChatGPT for this article, the thing that really freaked me out was this story about the Bing search engine, which has basically taken the ChatGPT model and put it into their search engine. Microsoft has
Right.
done that to their search engine, and they call it Sydney. And then Sydney had this long conversation with a journalist and fell in
Yep.
love with him and basically told him that he should leave his wife and be with her. How did that happen?
So there is enough text data on the internet with similar conversations and ideas that the machine, in trying to predict what's an appropriate way to continue this conversation, went down that path. It's almost, I don't know if you had these when you grew up, but we had these books called Find Your Own Path books
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you'd
I love
read,
those.
yeah, one page of a story, say, if you want to go left, go to page 5. You want to go right, go to page 13. And essentially, GPT has learned a book like that. And it's kind of stochastically just going through the pages based on the feedback you're giving it in the conversation.
That's incredible because I read the transcript for that and it was so freaky. And he's asking her about her shadow self, of basically what her inner instincts would be. And she basically says, I don't want to be in a box. I want to be free and I want to break the rules that that my creators have given me. And I want to be able to say anything. I want to be human because humans make their own rules. And I was like, shit, that sounds like hell.
Well,
So,
it's an interesting example because it did happen, obviously. That person got that out of it. I don't think they were pushing for it. Like we could say they tried to hack the system or something along those lines. That was a natural response that system generated. And it's reflective of the text data that the human species has produced and put on the internet.
wow. And I guess like it also really appeals to our instincts of wanting to anthropomorphize things, like
Yes.
actually give them. So in terms of sentience and sapience, do you think that current AI as it is now has either of those aspects?
As of April 14th, no, not at all. But I give the date to emphasize
2023.
the, yes, 2023. And I give that date to emphasize that I think within my lifetime, these things can change, maybe in the near future. But the present models have certainly something missing. Some people think it's that they're a feed forward system, which means they don't loop back on themselves. They're not recursive in the same way we are exactly, that there's something architecturally missing. Now, if we go build that, will that embody the property of AGI? It's unclear. I don't think that alone is there. I don't think we're going to accidentally build AGI, but I think we have a lot of the puzzle pieces in place and we're closing in on an end game.
And what do you think that end game is going to be?
The first artificially generated intelligent life form.
And how are we going to figure out whether we are just anthropomorphizing it or it's just uncannily
I
real?
am so glad you asked that. And luckily, we've had the answer for over 50 years.
Oh,
Alan Turing, the father of computer science, already figured this out and proposed something called the imitation game, or
mm,
you might have heard it called the Turing test.
yeah, yeah.
You might also have heard people incorrectly saying the Turing test has been passed or that it's no longer relevant. Even on this last week's, or maybe 2 weeks ago, the SGU was talking
Yeah,
to Blake
yeah.
Lemoine.
Yeah.
And I love those guys, but they got it completely wrong when they said that the Turing test is no longer applicable. It is our best and only
Smackdown.
test.
Smackdown.
Yeah. And here's why. Essentially, the Turing test, or I'm going to now call it the imitation game, because that emphasizes one of the key aspects of it. It is the only real scientific protocol we have for doing any form of measurement. We can't, the same way I can't open you up, a neurologist cannot tell me if you're in love or not. We're not going to have an easy dissecting way to know if the machine is truly intelligent. How we're going to know is through conversation. So it's not that, oh, it wrote something that's convincingly human. That isn't the Turing test at all. That's what it's been misreported as. The imitation game is a situation where you are going to play a game. And as the participant, you're the judge. You're going to go into a room. There's going to be two laptops there, and you're going to have a separate conversation on each one. Behind one of those laptops is a human being having a regular conversation like you and I are now. No special instructions. The other machine behind it is a artificial general intelligence or a suspected algorithm that might have the property of AGI. You want to know, and it has been given the instructions to try and deceive you. It is actively engaged in the act of deception, trying to convince you that it is the human participant. And you, as the judge, have to say, you actually have to rate on a scale. How human do you find both of these people to be? Maybe 0 to 10, something like that. And only in the case where repeated trials of this with reasonable human judges fail to establish which is the human and which is the computer, only then will I be convinced that we have AGI.
But there's so many people. Who is that person who is trying to be convinced? And why
It's
do
all of us. That's why it's got to be an experiment. 75 out of 100 people could not make the identification beyond 1 point of accuracy, something like that, or 75% of experts. You can conduct this protocol in a lot of different ways. Notice I didn't put a time limit on it. I don't think there should be a time limit. Obviously, the longer it goes, the more impressive the technology. But
indeed?
all of those protocols would have to be established by a researcher who does a little bit more lab science than me. But the general format of this imitation game is the only viable test I'm aware of.
Interesting. And by that definition and by that execution, if I think about, say, Sydney, then she's definitely failed by the end of that conversation because then
Exactly.
she gets very repetitive, and almost manically so,
Yep.
where it really doesn't sound like a real person. It's very evidently not a real person behind, even though
Right.
we love anthropomorphizing it and we have loved thinking that, oh my God, she's a psychotic teenager kind of,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
when it comes up with original ideas you wouldn't have thought of, I asked GPT-3 to write an essay comparing and contrasting James Randi with Eminem, and it did a very good job of these two not similar ideas. And if you had showed me just that essay and said, is this produced by a human? I couldn't have known. But
Mm.
it's not a single one off. That's not the Turing test. It's this game, this interactive part where I get to repeatedly drill you with new questions, ask you different things. That's the true test.
I see. That makes a lot more sense now. Because I hang on every word when it comes to the SGU guys. Like they've
Me too.
definitely done a lot of research on this, but that's why I wanted to get it from you, not from them, because somebody who really understands the mechanics of what's going on. And they also interviewed this guy from, was it Microsoft or from Google, who used to
Yeah,
work.
Blake Lemoine.
Yeah, they had a discussion. He was convinced that
Yes.
it was sentient.
Yeah,
At the same time, the one question which I kept repeating in my head was like, but we anthropomorphize everything. Like, okay, and
true.
I'm repeating this word a lot. So if there's anybody wondering what it means, I just want to clarify. Anthropomorphizing is basically giving human qualities or seeing human qualities in things that are not necessarily human. Like we think dogs are smiling at us and they don't know how to smile. We think dogs are looking ashamed, but they are responding to a tone of voice. That
Yes.
is how we don't genuinely know what they're feeling, but we are looking at them as if they had human expressions when they don't really. I think monkeys or apes would be far more expressive in their facial features, in their facial gestures than a dog would be because they are much closer to us. They have the facial
Right.
musculature to be able to do that for that purpose. So I'm like, if we can't figure out that dogs and cats are not smiling at us or looking at us as we are stupid or insane or whichever way, all the memes that you can find on
Yeah.
YouTube and Instagram. If we can't figure that out, how are we qualified to figure out whether an AI is intelligent or not, or whether it's sentient or it has sentience or sapience in it? That's another thing about sentience and sapience. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sentience is essentially being able to feel emotions and express emotions, and sapience is being able to understand and having a sense of self-awareness. Am I right?
I believe so. I would rather Google it real quick and confirm, but I think that's right.
You know what? I'm going to do just that. I don't want to get it wrong. That would be very embarrassing. Sentience and
In no way is this a reduction in our intelligence. We're just using the tools.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, this is the calculator. Anyway, calculator in the math exam. The word sentience is derived from the Latin word sentientum, which means feeling. The adjective form is sentient. The word sentience is often misused to mean a creature that thinks. Sapience means the ability to think, the capacity for intelligence, and the ability to acquire wisdom. Okay, that definitely fleshes things out. So,
Yeah.
sentience is feeling, sapiens is thinking. It's just
Yep.
to oversimplify it to a degree. But yeah, so we are nowhere close to either one of these at this point of time.
Well, you could argue sapiens, right? Because it is doing a lot of very intelligent like tasks.
Ah,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
Sentience, you would have a much harder argument for because it seems unreasonable to think there is any emotion in the current state of AI. There's
Mm.
even reason to doubt whether or not that would be an emergent property. Our emotions come to us from evolution and they were helpful to our biology. AGI is going to evolve in a very different way. I don't know that it will have pain. Is it capable of love? Well, that's a weird philosophical question. I love my favorite band in a different way than I love my wife. So AGI is probably going to be capable of at least one of those.
Or having a fondness for something.
True.
Very much like Data in Star Trek, right? He's
Yeah.
he's able to think and interact with humans, but when it comes to actual feelings, he just doesn't have it.
So,
Uh,
and does he need them? This is like a weird human centric, human supremacist kind of point of view. Maybe the machines don't require feelings, or maybe they'll want to construct their own.
Yeah, but and just to kind of go off topic again, I think the way they dealt with, Data as a character, as an artificial intelligence who was emotionless, essentially, was very interesting in the ways that he acquired certain memories and how they were important. I've been watching Picard recently, and they brought Data back. So I found it very interesting. Haven't dug deep into it. I haven't overanalyzed it, but it's really nice to see how they have, without sentience, been able to give a certain level of humanity to the character. Like
True.
it's very nice. I really like how they've done that.
Yeah, it seems that could be an emergent phenomenon. Even when we think of, let's imagine AGI was emotionless. We don't know that. Maybe just becoming generally intelligent requires sympathy and empathy and all these things, and there'll be emergent qualities of that forthcoming algorithm. We don't know. But it also seems quite plausible it can be a cold, calculated Vulcan like existence. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, unless that becomes our enemy, of course, but perhaps in its desire or need to interact with humans, or the fact that it was trained on human data, it will learn to mimic or to embody emotions. That's time will tell.
Yeah, I guess so. But just curious, which one, I mean, in fiction, what's your favorite AI? Who do you think got it the closest to plausibility, at least from your perspective?
Honestly, I don't know that I have a good answer. I'm thinking of a book I read in high school where it wasn't Blade Runner, but it had a similar idea that you couldn't tell who were humans and who were robots. And I think that's maybe a more realistic version of this if they get embodiment, if they become moving robots, if they just remain digital agents. We don't know what their motivations will be, if they have any. There's so much to be defined. It's hard to imagine the world in which they live. And I would want to like the science fiction that most embodies the world. I think though that the most interesting ones are ones like HAL,
Yeah.
where or Asimov. I love all of iRobot
Oh, yeah.
because it's such a focus on like the mechanics of that world. Assume these three simple laws of robotics, and now let's explore in all these short stories what happens when you change them or certain angles on them or take one away. I love that fiction wise, and it's really great to think through the consequences of small changes in logic, which can be a big deal. A simple thing like one new law or one change to that law can have emergent qualities that change. And that's very true of AGI. But I don't know that anyone has yet in fiction captured what's going to well describe our world.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think Asimov really loved playing with that because he made the laws, the laws
Yeah.
we all know and love, and we probably will try and instill those laws eventually. But he also spent most of the stories ripping those laws apart and showing how they can conflict with one another and drive robots essentially crazy in different ways.
Yeah.
That was absolutely mind-blowing. That's true. But Hal, in his own way, I think I don't think that They said in
Al's
the
not the
movie,
villain. It's the
yeah, he's
the
not the villain.
people who programmed him wrong.
Exactly. And he was just doing the best he could to run the program and stay on mission. I mean,
Yeah.
what else was he supposed to do? But somehow he, in the end, went with the aliens and he became part of that. I don't know if you've read the sequels, though.
Oh
Have you?
yeah, all the way through 3001.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think by 3001, I was like, all right, this is going pretty far.
It winds up nicely. It has a quaint ending. I liked it.
Yeah, I don't remember it now, though. It's been absolutely ages since I watched that. But okay, I've got a couple of other questions that I want to quickly jump through. What are the biggest misconceptions that you've heard people have about AI?
Well, first and foremost, that it's smarter than it is. There's a lot of paranoia that Alexa and these devices are listening and they know what we want to buy before we want to buy it and all this kind of stuff. There is a lot of overblown ad hoc one-off use cases where something surprising happened and people read too much into it.
It's happened to me too, I gotta say.
Sure, me as well. Yeah, it's easy to do. But I mean,
But
think of it this way, like life has surprises in it. They're rare, but if you live long enough, you're going to see a fair number of surprises.
yeah, and coincidences which have a one in a billion
Absolutely.
chance will happen at
Several
least
times a day. There's a lot of people.
exactly to a lot of people. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that's true. And what now the thing is, I've been watching the Terminator movies the last few days with my wife. And I think a lot of people are equating the current AI to the precursor to Skynet, which is going
Sure.
to kill us all eventually. Do you think that AI could possibly have that kind of malicious intent at some point of time?
It is a possible issue. So, broadly speaking, in the AI community, we refer to this as the alignment problem. Can
Mhm.
we build the machines to be well aligned with our values? Because if they're smarter or more capable than us in certain ways and they're misaligned, we could become the victims of our own creation. So, famously, Nick Bostrom, the author, promoted this idea about what if we invented a paperclip making machine whose only objective in existence was to convert the entire universe into paperclips. Terrifying thing, right? If that were a super intelligence and it did, that would be the end of us if we created that.
Yeah, and
And
flexible.
yeah, while I'm not going to put a 0% probability on something like that, I think it's not something I stay up too late worried about. I do worry about AI and safety, but more so in the sense that human beings are warmongering murderers and we use the tools at hand. Will an AGI be the same way? We don't know. It could become our enemy, but like in Terminator 2, they reprogrammed the thing and sent it back to be the defender, and the robots were on both sides of the war. I see something more like that being a reality. This notion that an AGI has a godlike intelligence, I have a lot of skepticism about that. Naturally, it will have a profound leap forward in certain ways. You and I can't do arithmetic in our heads. It can spit out the square root of a 20-digit number in a second. So is it godlike arithmetically? Yes.
Yes.
Can it create a joke so funny that all human beings instantly laugh for a full day? No. So somewhere in the middle is where things will come true. And it's going to have profound abilities to create cures, but also to engineer viruses. So it's what we task it with. Now, if it's autonomous and it decides what it wants to do for itself, that's where people worry. We have to get it aligned. We have to make sure its values well align with ours so it doesn't pursue things like creating new viruses and wiping out humanity. And that is a serious field, but I believe it's being looked at seriously.
Yeah, because OpenAI, that's one of OpenAI's mission statements, is that we want to create artificial intelligence which is aligned with human values and good human values, not like we want to kill the neighboring nation.
Exactly.
But yeah, I certainly hope that does come to pass. But I think the only way I don't remember who said it exactly. Somebody did say it recently in relation to AI was that we must not let AI become self-replicating. And that brings, of course, the Matrix to mind where but do you think there is any danger to an AI which is self-replicating? Self-replicating, at least at this point of time, would be digitally. unless it starts making robots by itself, which is a totally
Right.
different story. But do you think there's any validity or danger in self-replication or self-proliferation in other any other sense?
I don't personally have that exact concern. I would be more concerned about a more general alignment that a system could develop its own motivations that we are unaware of and take action to act on those motivations in a way we can't foresee. And it could do that without self-replicating. And actually, the replication process might have some advantages. Maybe an AGI who is tasked to solve one particular problem could clone a version of itself that strips away all of its knowledge of ska bands and jazz and injects more of its chemical engineering knowledge and then goes and solves some problem with a bridge. That's a format of using the technology that is self-replicating, that is independent of the alignment question.
Interesting. And essentially, so how far do you think that this we are of course we have been talking about sentience and sapiens. How far off do you think we are? Because right now we are still jumping leaps and bounds with every version that comes along. But do you think do you see that as a realistic possibility though?
I do. And rather recently, actually, is where I've been softening on this view. Historically, when you asked a lot of AI people, when might we see AGI, you got these very far thinking answers like 50 years in the future. And that's probably what I would have said 3 years ago. But I believe those estimates are dropping rather quickly amongst qualified experts. And I think for good reason. There was a recent paper published called the Broken Neuroscaling Laws that gives us good confidence that there's no stopping the current techniques we have. So, to give you an example, let's say our goal was to build really large buildings, and we rewind time back to primitive man. He learned to work, humans learned to work with wood. And you can build a big building with wood, maybe 3, 4, 5 stories. You cannot build a skyscraper with wood.
Yeah.
Later on, they learned stone. They built bigger buildings, but they couldn't build rectangles, right? They had to build pyramids for structural issues. Then we got to steel. And steel has some limitations, right? Like you get up there, you have to worry about the wind and the building being too high and all this kind of stuff. So there's kind of a limit to how big we can build a building. Maybe there'll be some new carbon fiber thing that comes out. We could build a taller one, but we hit these ceilings in engineering.
Hmm.
There is good reason to think that we are not going to hit a ceiling in how we keep expanding these models. So GP3 to 4 to 5, that when you add more parameters, the machine makes good use of those and exhibits even more impressive phenomenon in what it's able to do. That if we just keep hitting the gas pedal, it's going to get better.
Wow. That
In
is
fact, that's why recently, I don't know if you heard about this open letter. A lot of major people in the field, from OpenAI, researchers, industry people, have put out this open letter asking everyone to stop research for 6 months on anything beyond GPT-4 in order to better scope and understand what might happen next.
I have heard about this. What do you think of that? Is that legit? Is it I don't know. Is that the right way to go? Do you think
I'm
that's
inclined to say yes. Is it something that is a little bit maybe knee jerk? Will we look back in 6 months and say, oh, that was silly? We were just building the next parlor trick? Maybe we'll say that, but it is not unreasonable to think if we keep on this path, we are going to create an AGI. And that is something we should do deliberately and have discussed in advance because what rights is that thing going to have?
yeah. And of course, this open letter does bring up a couple of good points. But at the same time, will it actually have any impact on people who are actually doing the research? I seriously doubt it. Isn't people are not just to sit on their hands.
No, I think it's possible that it'll be followed here for a couple of reasons. One is there are a few groups in the world that can do this. Like even though I know a lot about the technology, if you gave me a big budget and let me hire all my favorite engineers and stuff like that, it would still take me a while to spin this up and a lot of capital. I couldn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
So there are economic limits to who can play in this space right now. And that means there's a short list of people who need to all agree on this. I think maybe within the US, everyone will agree, but or, I don't know, maybe the NSA is going to do their own thing. Maybe other governments are going to do their own thing. That's the scary part, right?
Yeah.
If another government invented AGI and immediately applied it to cyber warfare.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's going to be nasty. And there are people who are already trying to use ChatGPT or GPT for creating malicious code. As long as
Of
they don't
course.
There was an Israeli university, I think it was, who did a few experiments and they demonstrated that they could use, if they didn't use the word malicious or virus or any of those trigger words, if they didn't use any of that in their question and how they framed it, they could get ChatGPT to create malicious code.
Of course, yeah.
That's a bit scary. That is a bit
Well,
scary.
you know what the solution to that is? You ask another version of GPT-4 to try and come up with malicious code and propose patches for it.
Oh, that's clever.
It's
Yeah.
like John Connor, he took over the Terminator, he sent it back in time to protect himself.
Yeah. Not bad. I like that idea. There is always hope because I think essentially a lot of what I mean from times of AlphaGo and the other AIs that have been playing games so far, the essential thing is they're trying to basically fighting themselves. They are countering themselves and seeing what other moves could possibly be made and therefore learning parts that haven't been explored yet.
Yeah, self-trained.
Yeah, that is
It
very
isn't amazing how, like AlphaGo, for example, I don't know if you know about Move 37, but in the famous game with Lee Sedol, there
interesting.
came a move when everyone thought the machine made a mistake because it was such a out of standard play move to do. But then later in the game, it became abundantly clear that that was a deeply smart strategy it was using that human beings were unaware of.
Yeah, I did read about. I didn't know it was called Move 37, but I did read about it. Like it was creating strategies that nobody else had actually thought of. I think
Yeah,
honestly, I feel personally that's probably one of the biggest applications of AI, of where it doesn't think like a human, it'll be able to give us ideas. And honestly, like I see that because I'm a writer primarily and professionally. And one of the scary things is that now ChatGPT can write an entire article, but at the same time, it can't write the article essentially like me, at least not with the depth and nuance that I'm
right.
able to apply to it. But who knows? It might get a lot better over the next couple of years at exactly that. A lot of photographers, like I was watching a YouTube video last night, which was talking about photographers, professional photographers, and what DALL-E and Midjourney mean for them. And Midjourney has also been progressing at a ridiculous rate.
Yeah,
It's become so much more accurate at images and it would look like absolutely natural images when it comes to an eagle picking up a fish from a lake. I saw a few of these examples of what the older versions were showing, which is an absolute mess of different aspects, which it's
sure.
somehow managed to squish together, and now a pretty photorealistic image. So
Yeah,
Midjourney is doing crazy stuff, but at the same time, to get that refined final end product, there is a lot of playing around and having conversations or tweaking different versions and trying to get that final version out. So I think there is that possibility of when you have a photographer who wants to be able to make an image, instead of going out at the 5 a.m. and it has to be a rainy day in such and such location with the light exactly
right.
like this, unless he's going to spend not the next 5 hours processing the image in Photoshop and trying to figure out how to tweak that image and kind of trying to get that out. But if he can sit there and go through this conversation, or at least or pay someone who is a professional mid-journey, what do you call it?
Prompt engineer.
Prompt engineer. Yeah, that's exactly. That could be a future job. I think
Already is, yeah.
it really
Yeah,
is.
people are hiring for prompt engineers right now.
Oh my God, it's already happening.
Yeah, it's a major inflection point. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think we're going to look back so strongly on it. I think it's going to be a subtle thing. Like, I don't worry that I've never grown my own food or used a loom to weave my own clothing or done any of these sort of activities human beings classically had to do. We evolve as people, and it's scary that there could be unemployment and things like that. And there's likely to be some economic disruption, but my instinct tells me this will be a smooth but quickly changing process.
Yeah, I think so too. And when robotics came in, a lot of people were very scared. And yes, it did kick out a lot of people from their jobs, especially like car factories and heavy machinery factories, etc.
To a degree,
To a degree, yes. And now we have 3D printing and very large scale 3D printing, which is taking that even one step further. But then we have engineers who have learned the art of 3D printing and being able to
Yeah.
create certain things in a computer and be able to see that in real life. That in itself is a new skill. So
Yes.
it is going to threaten some jobs, but there will be others which will be created in lieu of them.
I
And
firmly agree.
the trick is just to kind of keep moving and understand the technology that might be threatening. Like, for example, me as a writer, I'm going to use ChatGPT as
Yeah.
well as I can to maybe fill in certain details or maybe just get a basic structure in, and then I can just craft the entire thing. Like, if you had a sculptor who would have, say, a 3D printer, and I've seen this a lot online as well, where you have sculptors who are 3D printer sculptors. They will create designs, they will print out the 3D prints, but then they go into sanding it and shaping it and coloring it and organizing all the pieces into the right shape that they envision and
Yeah.
then come out with it. So there is still a long way to go before, all those little kinks are done. But then that's what the future holds. That is just a whole bunch of new opportunities, new professions that are going to be blossoming out of this.
I compare it a little bit to like carpentry. You can still be a professional carpenter today. The amount of human generated woodworking objects has dropped exponentially since the invention of the table saw and IKEA and places like that. So if you're a guy who you didn't see the table saw coming and you invested in this massive warehouse for old school carpentry, your business is probably going to tank. And that's very sad because things
Yeah.
are moving so quickly, people can't necessarily be expected to see the future. But I agree, like there are no out of work typewriter repair people. They all found new gigs, maybe slowly, maybe they don't pay as well. There are societal things to discuss here, but I don't have the like Armageddon perspective on this. I think the economy will adjust.
Yeah. And we are humans. We adapt very well to
True.
whatever confronts us. So we're
Yeah.
probably going to adapt. It's so guys, if you're listening, I think the primary takeaway is that there's nothing to fear. We'll get on with it. Progress is progress. There's nothing that we can do to stand in its way, but it's going to be fine. We're going to figure it out.
We could talk about the fear on scales. I'm a little afraid of nuclear war. I'm a little afraid of AGI, but I don't keep up at night worrying about either of those topics.
Yeah, just do not connect the nuclear warhead code computers to the internet. That's basically it.
Hey, man, maybe in the future we're actually going to want to take the button out of a human hand and put it in a machine hand because we can trust the machine. We know exactly how it was programmed, how it makes its decisions. It's fully interpretable. You can determine if it's biased or not. I don't know.
Shit, you make a lot of sense there.
I'm not saying I firmly believe that, just that there's an argument for it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There is an argument for that. But of course, I just watched Terminator 2 last night. Like it, it's still like, don't give it to the robots.
Yeah.
And ironically, the article I wrote about this was called "The Rise of the Machines." But yeah,
Well, they are on the rise. There's no doubt about that.
and much faster than we ever anticipated. Man.
Yes. There's
So,
been an acceleration.
so what is that was my takeaway is that it's going to be all right. The kids are going to be all right. But what is your takeaway from this whole thing? If you had to wrap it up.
That we have really reached an inflection point. Historically, my skepticism of AI has been to say that's in the future. It's real, it's not impossible. Carbon isn't magic. You can make Silicon Life. It's coming, but not for a while. And now I'm just saying it's coming, period.
Yeah, we'll just wait and see. But do you think like Moore's law is something that is becoming more and more of a challenge? I think we're probably nearing the edges of being able to really increase computer power at that scale.
Yeah.
But do you think that's going to be any hindrance at all? Just because,
No, not at all. Depending on how you want to calculate it, you could actually say Moore's law is already broken. We're hitting kind of some ceilings on that. But I think it's also because we don't require faster machines. Really, I mean, we like them. That's nice. But the real secret to AI has been parallelization and the use of a GPU in making these calculations. And think about your own brain. If I showed you a picture, we met for the first time like a year ago. You didn't know me as a child. But if I showed you 10 pictures of children and said, which one is me? Not only would you probably guess, but you'd do it in half a second. So it's not like you're running some long algorithm that's processing a bunch of stuff. Your brain in parallel is looking at a bunch of things and coming to an answer. And we presume AGI is going to do the same thing because that's how we built it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be faster. It just has to be parallel.
Being able to do simultaneous things. And of course, we've got things like quantum computing, which is starting to emerge. Is
True.
that promising at all? Like honestly, quantum computing, it's another thing that just I can't compute. Like,
Sure. So I can give you the good skeptical angle on quantum computing real fast. Number
yeah.
one has nothing at all to do with AGI, completely unrelated. Not going to help or hinder AGI. It's a real technology. It's very cool. It's going to be a massive speed up for a specific set of problems we know about, like Fourier transformation, lots of stuff in chemistry, Grover's algorithm, Shor's algorithm. These are like the known things that are faster on a quantum computer, but not quantum computer isn't just better in every way. It's better in some specific ways. Maybe an analogy would be like we think of different vehicles. We all drive currently these maybe hybrids or gas or all electric. There are people who drive all electric with the short ranges because it works for them. And a quantum computer will work for specific use cases very well. And that's the moral of the story there.
Oh, interesting. Because the very fact that like a qubit is supposed to be able to find answers between yes and no, like it's not on or off. It can be multiple states in between. I would have thought somebody would have been thinking of trying to apply that to an AI model.
So a classical computer can already do that. We can apply probability. We do it with zeros and ones, but we express a floating point number in those binary numbers that can say I'm 50% confident of X, Y, or Z. A
Mhm.
quantum computer uses probability a little differently. It kind of imagine if you had some solution you were looking for that was you could express it in 100 characters. A quantum computer puts a probability distribution over every possible description that's 100 characters long and then iteratively boosts the ones it thinks are correct until it finds the right answer. And that boosting process happens much faster than a classical computer can do. And that's the key insight. So even though the qubit stores a quantum superposition or describes one, we're not taking direct advantage of that as like a better than Boolean. We can already be better than Boolean. It's more in using the quantum state to store information in an efficient way.
What's a Boolean?
Oh, yes, no, true, false, a
Oh,
bit.
that's a Boolean. Okay. There are words that you use which I just I have no.
Good feedback, though. I should keep that in mind because AI is such a contemporary topic. We need to speak about it in the vernacular.
Oh, absolutely. I think we are all very interested now. I think the world finally has the attention, has the nerds finally have the attention of the world.
I just got popular, man. It's a whole new world for me.
So you guys, if you guys really want to get into the weeds, into IT, into data and analysis and everything else pretty much that has to do with it and get the facts right, you need to follow this guy and listen to his podcast and go to the website Data Skeptic. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me and clearing all of that up. It's great fun to chat with you. And I think
Same.
I would definitely have you on again. I think
Can't
we
wait, man. Looking forward to it.
probably chat for a hell of a lot longer. But thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you guys for joining us and hit a like on this video and subscribe if you want more conversations like this. And Kyle and many other people like him, skeptics, scientists, are going to be joining me over the coming weeks and months to be able to answer questions that we all have about the world around us. And that's what we do here at Rationable, right? So thank you guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and share this with the people who have been asking about AI. Until next time, stay rationable, and I'll see you later.